Levi will maybe help troubleshoot it here if we can't get it to work, so. But I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. Obviously, the reason this is being held is for those, I'm sure there's some here that know how they're gonna vote, some that don't know how they're gonna vote, but it's mainly for the ones that don't know, okay, what is this all about? We're hoping to get some of those questions answered tonight. We have representatives from both Keep It Local and property tax side. From Keep It Local, we've got Matt Perdue and Aaron Burst, is that right? Matt and Aaron, and from the end property tax, Charlie Nelson and Tony Garrett. So they will be our speakers for tonight. We will give them a kind of a quick little 10-minute. They can give a 10-minute spiel of what they want to say and what the point is they're trying to get across. And then from there, we'll just open it up to questions. So, all I ask, as I know this can be contentious for some people, we're all adults here, and I want everybody to be respectful. If you don't want to be respectful, this isn't the place to come to, okay? We want everybody to be respectful. Questions, when the questions start, we prefer, unless you can speak real loud, there is a microphone back there, because the problem is if you don't go to the microphone, you may not be heard on the street, okay? So when I can maybe try and get a microphone here, we could possibly try and hand around if Levi thinks it'll work. So, okay, we're gonna go, any questions after they're giving their 10 minutes each, approximately, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes, but we're gonna give them 10 minutes. Then we'll start with our questions. I would prefer that anybody that has a question at least gets their question answered before somebody gets a second question, okay? I think it's fair to everybody. Once as everybody has had their first question asked, we can sure move on if there's time for other people that may have questions like a second round. Does that make sense? But I really want everybody that has a question to get that opportunity to have that. Okay, we're gonna shoot, we're gonna kind of run it we don't want to go over an hour and a half. Okay, and if things look like we get up to an hour and 50 minutes, it doesn't feel like we're really gaining any ground, we'll probably just pull the pin on it. If we do get done a little bit earlier and a lot of people have their questions asked, maybe we do have the representatives here. I want to thank them for coming, Jared and Randy and Mike. Maybe we can, if we have a little extra time, maybe they would be interested if somebody has questions on any of the other measures. Maybe they could enlighten you on some of them too. If we have time towards the end, or even afterwards, I'm sure they may stick around and help you there. So, and I really want people to understand that at the end of it, we're gonna have people that are gonna have to agree to disagree. Because obviously there are gonna be people here that feel this way is right, and one feels the other way. And you're just gonna have to agree to disagree. It's not the place to get an argument over it. It's not the place. And we're not here to talk about anything until we get to the end, but measure 4, okay? We want to keep our questions to that. If you have a problem with something that's going on in Bismarck, well, go out to Bismarck, or talk to your representatives afterwards. If it's not pertinent to measure 4, there's people here that are here to hear about measure 4, so let's try and keep it to measure 4. Is that okay? You okay on that? Okay? Other than that, I guess we can go ahead and get it started. Whoever would like to start, if it doesn't matter to me.
Go ahead if you guys want.
All right, get it rolling.
You can maybe give a quick introduction of yourselves.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks everyone for being here. Good turnout. All right. This is about as many people that was at a Fargo event that I had this morning. So thank you for being here. My name is Tony Gehrig. I am a former Fargo City Commissioner. I was there for 2 terms. I am a pilot with the Air National Guard, and I have been a homeowner in Fargo since 2009. So I've been paying taxes for a long time. I'm a proponent for Measure 4. So in 5 minutes, I'll give you what Measure 4 does, what Measure 4 doesn't do, how we could pay for it, some ideas how we can pay for it, an example of how it might look if it's enacted in your life or in my life, and then a short conclusion. So what Measure 4 does is very quite simple. It repeals and replaces property taxes as we know it today. And what that means is that the local subdivisions, like your city commission here in Hillsborough, can no longer tax you based on the value of your home. They can still tax your home. They can still do that, but not based on the value of your home. And I'm sure we'll talk about what the major difference of that is coming up here very quickly. Secondly, the state replaces the amount that Hillsborough pays in property taxes every year forever based on this year's budget forever until something in the Constitution changes. So it's repealed and replaced by the state. What Measure 4 does not do, it does not preempt the subs again from taxing your property. Okay, I want to make that very clear. Number two, it does not take away local control. Your city commission can still tax you in a multitude of different ways, just not based on the value of your home. Number three, it does not take money out of one pocket and put it in the other. Okay, this is a repeal and replace, and those dollars come from very different places, and you will see a direct benefit, unlike you have in the past. So how might we pay for it? This is a very expensive proposition, okay? Billions of dollars every biennium, which means every 2 years. First of all, the state of North Dakota, and especially the city of Fargo, uses hundreds of millions of dollars in economic incentives every single year to encourage companies and home growth in their cities and in the state. Economic incentives almost always mean that those people aren't paying property taxes. So while you pay property taxes, we'll say that these big business that's coming to Fargo or to Hillsborough is not going to pay for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. They'll get that economic incentive. So we no longer have to pay those hundreds of millions of dollars because no one's paying property taxes. There's been a surplus in the state of North Dakota this biennium of $750 million that can go directly towards ending property taxes in the state of North Dakota. $750 million in pork that have been identified that could be that you can see on propertytax.com. You can see where those come from, but there's identified $750 million in pork this biennium that goes straight to this measure. $550 million of one-time spending for this biennium, $550 million in one-time spending that could be redirected. The Prairie Dog Fund, people don't tell you this, is half of what it costs of getting rid of property taxes. If we maybe took some of the money from the Prairie Dog and moved it over to this ending property taxes, we could have both of those things, the Prairie Dog and end property taxes. And one thing people don't talk about a lot is the economic boon that happens in the state of North Dakota when you remove a tax burden. We all know that when you tax less, you see more growth. Well, if you have no property taxes, you'll see people live in Grand Forks versus East Grand Forks, Fargo versus Moorhead, Breckenridge, or excuse me, Wapton versus Breckenridge, got that right. So if you're going to create a business, you're going to choose North Dakota instead of Minnesota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, the other states. You'll come to North Dakota instead. You'll see an increase in sales tax and income tax when you have those things happen. By the way, the state of North Dakota's budget in the last 20 years has gone from $2 billion to $6 billion in those 20 years. 2 to 6, 300% increase in the last 20 years. There's got to be some money in there that we can cut out. You're going to have to cut something out of the budget. We've got plenty of room to do it. An example of how Measure 3 might work, Measure 4 would work if it happens here, whether in Hillsborough or Fargo. I live in Fargo, so I'm going to use my home as an example. My home is the average size home in the city of Fargo. It's $300,000. I pay $5,000 a year in property taxes. That's $420 a month, okay? So if you remove that burden from me, I have more money in my pocket, and when you have more money in your pocket, you spend it in the community, or at least in North Dakota. So it goes to zero for me. Then the state comes in and replaces those dollars. So your question you're asking yourself is, what happens if Hillsborough needs to raise more taxes in the future to fund your city? Well, the good news for you guys is only 7% of your budget is from property taxes. In Fargo, it's 25%. Here, it's only 7%. So if the city commission here said, well, we need $10,000 more this year to fund whatever, a road project or whatever you want to do, they could charge your home $10 a month for every home in the city. So you go from paying, let's say, $4,000, $3,000 a year to paying $300 a year. You're very far ahead when we reduce property taxes, and they still have the ability to charge more as your city grows, and you have the ability to tax even more. Again, once people have more money in their pocket, you'll see economic growth. If more businesses come here, you'll see more economic growth. You'll see more income tax. You'll see more sales tax. There is much more transparency when your city commission has to vote on a new road tax than to automatically increase your property taxes because the value of your home went up. That's an automatic increase they don't vote on. They don't need to vote on that. Businesses will pay their fair share. Businesses still pay taxes other than property taxes. One, they pay those other taxes like income tax. And two, that you can still tax their property. You can still tax their property, just not based on the value of that property. The last thing I'll say is the opponents of this measure say that there's no clear answer about how we're going to fund things once property taxes goes away. I just explained to you how we can do that. So there is a plan going forward. There is a plan of how to pay for it. I enumerated those for you as well. But doing nothing is truly no plan. This has been a problem. I'm sure you guys have lived here for a long time, owned property for a long time. This has been a problem in the state for decades, and nothing has been done. They've promised something will happen. Nothing has happened. So now it's time for you to take action yourself and make those things happen. We can afford it. It's good for you. It's good for North Dakota.
Thank you. I want to say thank you also to Paul for organizing this and for all of you for coming out. I think this is just a really important time for us to be having these conversations among the people in our community. Now, tonight, and we will hear about two different versions of property tax. We hear the opponent's side who says, yeah, property tax is maybe not the greatest, but we really, really need it. It's the best thing we can do, and we have to keep it. And they'll tell you all the reasons that government needs that money that's coming from my house. They'll tell you all the terrible ways that government will be harmed if we reduce this or eliminate this property tax. And yes, there may be people who are forced out of their house, and there may be some families that suffer a little bit, but this is just the necessary cost of having good government. And then they'll maybe tell you that it's your fault because you haven't voted hard enough. You didn't choose the right representatives or the right, local leaders. Now, tonight, we're going to tell you that yes, we do need taxes to fund government. There's no doubt about that. But good government will serve the people. It won't harm them. It won't impoverish them like the property tax is doing. And it won't tax you with a tax that's rigged to favor some people over others. And it won't be a tax that goes up 10, 20, or more times faster than your income does. And so now this phrase about local control, we hear that a lot. In my mind, local control is what we're doing tonight. When the community comes together and they make their voices heard and they have some control over what happens with their local government. Often the other side, local control, is about how the government gets to control how much money you get to keep. I am a mom. I have a grandchild. We've lived here, have our home paid off, and I want to stay in my home. I want my grandchildren to know the home that their parents grew up in. I want my children to buy homes here that they can raise their children in. Right now, my sons have bought their homes in Minnesota because they simply couldn't afford the Fargo property taxes. Now, Paul says we need to agree to disagree. And at some degree, at some level, that is true. I don't even agree with my husband 100% of the time. Anybody else? So, yeah. Okay. So we don't have to agree on everything, but I hope that we can understand the reasoning and perhaps acknowledge the validity of the arguments that are going to be made tonight. Bring the facts and the ideas that you hear tonight, bring those to your judgment, to your decisions that you make regarding this property tax, and continue the conversation beyond tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Shar, for presenting that side of the argument. Really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you all. Thank you for being here. My name is Matt Perdue. I'm the Government Relations Director for North Dakota Farmers Union. I also farm with my family up near Ray, North Dakota, in the northwest corner of the state. I'll just start with a quick tidbit. When I was in high school in 2008, we were the top-ranked 9-man football team in the state. Rolled through the season undefeated, got to the state championship game, got to play the Hillsboro Burros. We were riding high into the game and lost 46-8. So if you're here to beat up on me, just know you already had your chance and you used it. I just want to start from this place. So A year ago, my members came together, farmers and ranchers from across the state of North Dakota, to have a conversation. For our state convention, we had a meaningful conversation about property tax. There were members who, wanted to have a conversation about elimination, members who wanted to have a conversation about reform, and ultimately, where our members landed was, we have to do something about property tax, but Measure 4, elimination of property tax, is not the right solution for North Dakota. And so, my mandate from my members is to oppose Measure 4 and advance property tax reform during the 2025 legislative session. And I take that very seriously and appreciate folks who, who really do want to dig in and get something done on property tax. I think Tony laid out some options for replacing the property tax. I think the reality is the state has to use half of its general fund to replace property tax, an obligation the state does not currently carry. Half of its current general fund will go towards that. And so, we can categorize certain things as pork and corporate welfare. There are certainly programs in there that farmers and ranchers care about. We can talk about economic development incentives, which I think many communities, including this one, have benefited from the jobs growth, the economic opportunities that has created. And I think at the end of the day, I think we could all sit down with the state budget and say, I wouldn't pay for this, and I wouldn't pay for that, and I wouldn't pay for that. This is a state of 800,000 people, different communities with different needs. And when we talk about property tax, really what we are talking about is the ability for each of those states to manage their needs, to generate the revenue they need to address them. And so we ultimately believe that this is going to result in a tax shift. The amount of collections in North Dakota of property tax are about equal with sales tax. If we didn't have any cuts in the state budget, which I would anticipate there would be, but you would be talking about doubling the state sales tax. I represent farmers and ranchers. I think a lot of the conversations I've had with legislators about what we do on the other side of Measure 4 is we eliminate sales tax exemptions for things like fertilizer, seeds, chemicals, used equipment, repairs. That is stuff that will have a negative impact on the economy here in Hillsboro. That's stuff that will have a negative impact on the economy in the state of North Dakota. You're talking about $30 with prices right now, $30 a ton for urea increase in price because it would be sales tax. That's a challenge for farmers and ranchers. I think it's something we need to recognize and acknowledge. And I think the last point I would make before I kick it over to Aaron is one of our biggest concerns with this is we think it's going to harm rural communities much more than it impacts our larger cities in the state. Because at some point, the legislature is obligated to replace at 2024 levels. Our state budget is heavily dependent on the energy industry. The two largest sources of tax collections in North Dakota are the oil extraction tax and the gross production tax. Each of those taxes generates more revenue in the state than property tax does. So you're talking about over double of the property tax levied in North Dakota is levied in gross production tax and oil extraction tax. We know that industry is not going to produce at the levels it is now forever. The industry itself is talking about terminal decline by 2050. And so at some point, communities are going to have to come to the legislature and say, we need to replace this, and you're going to be competing against Fargo for that funding. You're going to be competing against Grand Forks, Bismarck, Minot. The city of Fargo has 27 legislators representing it. How many cities are in this legislative district? I think that's a real challenge that we in rural communities need to be very clear-eyed about. So I'll kick it over to Aaron.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, thank you, Matt. And thank you, everybody. Appreciate being here. My name is Aaron Burst. I'm with the Association of Counties. I've been in county government now for 25 years, starting my career basically up in Grand Forks County as a prosecutor, and then serving some time in Stutzman and Cass County as a prosecutor, and now at the Association of Counties. I recognize, and I've been studying, I'm kind of a little bit of a nerd on this, I've been studying tax policy for years. If anybody says they have absolutely the best answer or the only answers on how to tax people for services, including myself, they're not telling you the truth. Tax policy is very difficult in terms of who should pay for services and what services should be paid for. So if you want me to get up here and say I absolutely know every answer to how this would all work, I don't, and nobody else does too. A couple of things I just want to address, and quite frankly, and I should have started with this, I totally respect your position, and anybody, I see the end unfair property, I totally respect your position. I don't think it's a long-term good position, but I respect it, and we're going to work through it and talk about other options. But I just want to clarify a couple of things. So the current system, as many of you know, might be frustrated with. But we've been dealing with this. This is not novel. This has been going on since the beginning of time. From the Roman Empire, we have always taxed property. You can go back to the 1800s in England, where you were taxing property based on the windows. When the country started, there was taxations on floor sizes. So we've been figuring out what the denominator is for tax assessment for years. So this is nothing new, and so I welcome the debate. My point would be, I think fair market value is about the most reasonable that we can assess as opposed to a square footage. If you do a square footage and you're in the rural community and you spend $200,000 to build your home, you might be lucky to get $150,000 for that home because there's not a market. Different than if you're in Fargo and you spend $200,000, the market is hot in Fargo or the Bismarck, and so you're going to have a large demand for then those homes, and so those folks actually have more value in their house. And again, if you disagree with me, you can just go to the Red Book and take a look at what the values are. Growing values are essential for a healthy community. And I know there are problems, but growth in values does not necessarily translate into higher taxes. And I know some of you might laugh at that because you might say every time, oh no, that's totally fine. No, totally fine. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, no, totally fine.
I'm inept. I'm sorry.
Well, if it's a phone call, I'll take it.
It's okay. Don't worry. I'm an idiot.
No, totally fine. Just a couple of things I want to respond to is counties bear a large brunt of people mad at property taxes. Counties administer the property tax system. So I will talk in general today about what property tax is in county government. But it's all political subdivisions. And almost every dime of your property tax goes to the local people in your communities, whether it's teachers, firefighters, prosecutors. That is all a local generated and local paid for tax. So if you're in Williams County out in Williston and you have a property tax that you pay, that will never go to pay for the Fargo diversion. Nor will the Fargo property taxes go to pay for building a nice marina in Bismarck. Property taxes are spent locally, with a couple exceptions, the medical school, which we're going to try to take another shot at getting rid of that on the levy. But then here's the other thing. When it comes to property taxes, and I know we're going to have some disagreements on this, political subdivisions, in particular counties, are creatures of the state. We have power that the state gives us. The state has currently given us the taxation power with assessed value on property. If this measure passes, there is no plan that we can just go ahead and start figuring out a new taxation system. Now, don't misunderstand me in the slightest. The legislature certainly could create a new system that we could use, whether it's the number of windows you have, number of grasses in your yard. You could come up with anything to figure out the denominator. But by default, we have to go to the legislature and say, what is the taxation mechanism that you want us to use if we don't have the value proposition in property tax? Now, there are sales tax opportunities. Some of the larger jurisdictions have that. home rule cities, counties like Cass County, Fargo, has opportunities to put on sales taxes. All of your counties probably do. Schools don't have sales tax authority. They would need the legislature to do that. Okay? Sales tax is also limited, and as Matt told you, sales tax works in large communities with economic development. I'm guessing for those of you who are up in Trail County, where do you buy your groceries on Saturday morning? If you were like me, you came out of a small town and you went into Bismarck to Costco or Sam's Club and you bought your groceries. That sales tax will be generated for the Burley counties, the Cass counties, the Bismarcks, the Fargos. It does not come back to you locally on your sales tax. So if we're talking about creating a new tax, which we could, which is possible, I will never say anything is impossible. We have to have an honest conversation on where that tax is generated and where it goes. So again, I welcome those conversations. Last thing I'll say, and I know we're short on time, when we say the legislature hasn't done anything, I somewhat disagree with that. We can argue whether they should have done more or less to lower property taxes, but I'll tell you this, county government gave up 20 mills on every single one of your taxes when they took over social service funding. That was gone. The county couldn't raise that, and I can show you the data, at least on the county side. I can't speak for other political subdivisions, but on the data, we had 15 years of slow growth on the county because that levy was taken away. Again, could we look at other things like that? We sure could, but now we got to ask ourselves, what do we want the state to take over? Do we want state to take over more things? Do we want them to take over and pay for court systems, prosecutors, deputies, school systems? Those are all legit questions to ask. But if we're going to take away that local generated property tax and replace it with something else, we either need to go to the legislature and get direction from them, or we have to figure out how else could we fund these services. So again, total respect to all, and Charlene, I've gone back with you for 10, 15 years last time we talked, and you've just been a peach to work with. So I do appreciate your passion for this issue. And if there's a way we can figure out a better way to do this, I certainly welcome it. I just think that this is burning down the house because you don't like the front door. But again, I'm more than willing to talk. And at the end of this, because we're on a short time, I will give you my email. You can email me any questions, even if you're upset with me. I totally welcome that, and we'll work through it with you. So thank you again for having us here. The fall time in the valley with the harvesting going on, I've been around the world, lucky enough to be around the world for a few times, and there's nothing better than the valley in the fall. So beautiful, beautiful place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. So with that being said, is there anybody that has any questions? I would bring the mic to you if you have a question, so they can hear you online.
Hi, my question is to you two over there.
Get you to not say your name, too.
Oh, my name is Sandy Sorry. I'm from Reynolds, North Dakota. Okay, and we are farmers. But my question is about our children. And I'm going to try not to cry here. I have a daughter in West Fargo who her and her husband worked very, very hard and were finally able to buy a house in West Fargo. And they have 3 beautiful children. Their house value has more than doubled. Their taxes went from $5,000 to $11,000 just for property taxes. She is having to go to the food bank and every place else to try and provide for her children. What do I tell her? What are you going to do for her? They were going to sell their house, and the realtor said no, because all you can afford is a fixer-upper. So, you know, with these property values going up like that, they didn't sign on for that. Oh, and by the way, their wages did not double.
Thank you for that question. I totally get where you're at. It does become hard in those fast-growing communities, and that certainly is an issue. I agree with that. Services continue to go up, and the cost of services continue to go up. My general feeling, and this is with the utmost sympathy because I get it, would be the legislature is on a path to trying to do something with primary residences. Now, you all see $500 and you might laugh and say that's not enough. I do think it's a start. I do think there's homestead credits, just like the farmers get, and I don't want to be controversial here. Farmsteads are exempt property. I think the legislature could extend that to the primary residences. I do think we should separate primary residence discussion on property taxes versus commercial. Commercial under this bill, and I'm not trying to bag on any outside folks, but under this bill, the Walmarts, the Costcos of the world get a property tax cut too. And anytime you get a property tax cut, that means, assuming you don't drop services, somebody else is going to pick up that tab. So I think there are ways to do it. I think the legislature is backed into those ways. But I do think primary residence does need a kick in the pants to try to help those folks like your daughter. I get that, totally get that.
Sure.
Excuse me. So, sorry. Yeah. Mr. Burst refers to that this is a problem in fast-growing communities. This is a problem everywhere. I live in rural Cass County, and the last 3 years, my property taxes have gone up 73%. In the last 6 years, 112%. We're doing the math. In another 6 years, we'll pay more on property tax than we did on our house payment, and it'll be about that time that we'll have to consider whether or not we can stay in our home. This is not isolated to West Fargo or other places that are seeing a boom. Now, he also said that there is no answer for what the best tax is, and he's probably right. But I can tell you what the worst tax is. And that's a tax that, first of all, is not based on your ability to pay. It's based on some magic number, made-up number, whatever. They say it's assessed value. Okay, but that's kind of like unrealized capital gains tax. Do you really benefit from that assessed value? Not at the time you're paying the tax, you don't. Is it applied equally to everyone? No. At any given time, anywhere from 20 to 30% of businesses are exempt from paying property tax. New homes don't pay property taxes. There's all sorts of people that don't pay it. And then, of course, we have all of our buy-downs for senior citizens and for special class, and our farmers, special classes that don't pay property tax. So whatever tax you have, it should be applied equally to everyone. And it should not be a tax that punishes you for buying that fixer-upper and fixing it up and improving your neighborhood. We want a tax that keeps people invested in their community and not fleeing because they can no longer afford it. So when we're trying to decide what is the best way to fund government, I think property tax is the absolute worst.
Any questions down here?
Thank you. So just a response to that, I totally get what you're saying. I'm a homeowner. Oh, my name is Alyssa Short. I'm a resident of Hillsborough and a business owner here. And I understand what you're saying. I'm a homeowner. I'm a business owner. I bought a fixer-upper. I did not buy a $500,000 home, and I do not expect to be assessed at a $500,000 value. So I expect to be assessed at the value of my home, which I think is fair. It's sort of like if I buy a felt coat versus a mink coat, you pay a different tax, it's a different charge. So I feel like there's kind of that expectation that you pay a higher tax based on what you're getting. So I'm kind of wondering just what's the alternative if it isn't based on the assessed value? Because obviously the taxes are still going to be based on something. So again, we're talking about windows, square footage, things like that. So if it isn't based on what the assessed value is, what are the taxes based on?
So a lot of people, and I'm one of those people, my first home was $100,000 when I bought it. When I sold it 5 years later, it was assessed at $180,000. I put a new bathroom in it. That was all I did to that house. So if you're someone who lives in a home for 20, 30, 40 years, especially in my city, city of Fargo, that home, when you bought it, may have been $70,000. And now you're being assessed for it at $300,000 and $400,000 and $500,000 in downtown Fargo or in that region. So you can say you didn't buy the mint coat, but you're being charged that way 30 years later. And that's the unintended consequence of property taxes, is as the values go up automatically, so do your taxes. So I didn't buy a mint coat. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I bought a Honda Civic, and it's just lasted a really long time, and it's still in good shape, right? So that's the downside. The alternative, and I'll respond directly to this table here, and I appreciate a lot of the comments you made. Most of the cities in this state do not need to go to legislature at all to have local control on how you tax properties. Most of the cities in the state right now could say every home in Hillsborough now has a $10 road fee. So instead of paying $100 or $200, and I pay $420 a month for my home, $420 a month for my home, I would pay $50 in the city of Fargo. You might pay $10 here in Hillsborough because your taxes are less here. You're still thousands and thousands of dollars ahead in that system than you are in your current system, and there's more transparency because in order for the city commission to put that road tax on the books, they have to have a vote. There has to be a 3-2 vote or a citywide vote to put that on there. So there's more transparency, it's cheaper for you, and it stays that amount until they vote to raise it again, which again goes back to the transparency. Whereas currently, you bought a home for $100,000, let's say, maybe you put $20,000 into it, okay, you think you have a $120,000 house. Now they say it's $200,000. Well, my house in Fargo since 2018 has gone up $85,000 in value. And I haven't done that much to it. I didn't put a new roof on, anything like that. I didn't put new siding on. I fixed the bathroom in this house too. So that's the benefit of the system of, hey, here's your fixed fee for your home every month. And it's gonna stay that way until that city commissioner makes a plea to you and tells you, I'm gonna raise your taxes. The current system is, you bought a house, 10 years later it's more valuable just because it's more valuable, just because they say it is, and they never took a vote on that. They never looked you in the eye and said, I'm gonna raise your taxes.
But if you were to list your house, would you list it at the price that you bought it or the price that it is currently valued at?
I would sell it at the fair market value, which is what Charlene was saying was, why am I paying for something that's an unrealized benefit? I'm not selling my house every single year, but every single year I'm paying more in taxes. So it's like the federal government saying, well, if you have a stock, you should pay taxes on that stock even though you haven't sold that stock yet. That's exactly what this is. It's an unrealized gain tax is what this is.
But you're still going to make up for that tax in some way.
You mean the property tax?
Property sales tax, something like that.
So with this measure, the state replaces every dime of what you're paying now. And they will forever. So every year forever, they'll pay exactly what Hillsborough is paying in property taxes right now to your city commission. Then in the future, if your city commission says, hey, that's not enough, they can vote in a $10 road tax, which does not need to go to the legislature. They can do that today if they want to. They can do it today with property tax still on the book. They can still do that. And that's how they raise revenue in the future. And instead of paying $100 or $200 or $420 a month, you're paying $10 a month. And and the city commission is still bringing in more dollars every year because the state is backfilling those funds forever.
But that's just sort of what you expect with the real estate investment.
I'm not quite sure the question. Yeah.
So if I could talk a little bit. So we've had, I think there's been some meaningful conversation about different ways to assess property taxes other than the value of the home. And I think square footage is one that seems to rise to the top as an alternative. And certainly you have situations where property tax is a greater burden, a greater relative burden for somebody than it is for somebody else. But let's say, for example, that we assess property taxes on square foot. You know, I live in a house that was built in 1925. That house has about 2,300 square feet. A good chunk of those square feet are in the basement. The basement is not usable, right? My house is currently valued at about $250,000. My wife, who convinced me to buy the house 4 years ago, really wants me to buy her a nicer house. And we've looked at a lot of other houses that are 2,400 square feet and cost $700,000, $600,000, which is a reminder that my wife also thinks I'm richer than I am. And but the reality is, you know, I don't know that it's inherently more fair for somebody who has a house that costs 3 times as much as their neighbor to pay the same exact amount in property tax. That house, the benefit that you get from the services your community provides add value to your property proportionally. That homeowner who has a $750,000 home is getting a higher monetary value from those services than that person who has a $250,000 square foot home. And yes, that's realizing the value of the property, but I don't know it's inherently more fair for that fixer-upper to get assessed the same value because we're assessing now on square foot. I think that same argument becomes problematic when we talk about agriculture. Agricultural property is assessed based on the productivity index, based on the productivity value of that land, which we in agriculture have worked really hard to make sure that's fair. It reflects the profit-generating potential of that land. And I don't think it's inherently more fair for the person at the top of the hill who has less productive land with less profit potential to pay the same exact value as a person at the bottom of the hill, because we now can't base that property tax on valuation. And so, again, I understand the frustration with the current system. I'm afraid that if we go to a new system, we're going to find just as many or more inequities and challenges and problems for our communities.
Everyone paying the same in property taxes, like that $50 road fee is what I'm assuming you're talking about. I have a neighbor who lives 3 doors down from me, and his home is about twice the value of my home. He doesn't get more garbage service than I do, but we pay the same amount, right? He doesn't have more police at his house than I do. We have the same coverage, right? He doesn't have more fire protection than I do. We have the same amount. In the city of Fargo, every home pays a flat fee for sewer. We have the same amount, even though he might use more than I do. So to say that it's unfair to have the same amount that we pay, like say $50 a house for a road fee versus property tax based on the value, I would say it's much more inequitable to pay more for your home because it's worth more, but you're not taking any more services from anybody else. Your argument plays both ways, right? So you have more services if you're paying the same amount of fee, or you have less services because I'm paying triple what you're paying. You know what I mean? So I don't think that argument holds water, even though I understand what you're saying.
If I could just address that. If any of you have a chance, the Tax Foundation did a study of North Dakota taxes. It's on the legislative website. I'd be happy to direct you to it. The Tax Foundation is, by everybody's assessment, a right of center organization. And they said property tax, getting rid of property tax has less economic value than working on income tax and sales tax. But that same question was asked during legislative hearing. And they said, yes, if you have a larger valued house, even though you might have the same deputy showing up at this house and that house, intrinsically your house is preserved in value for having that deputy, so it is not unfair to have them pay extra for the value of the house. So the Tax Foundation, excellent study, please read it. So I think that's the counter to that.
Okay, any more questions?
Well, the last conversation is all I guess and say it. There's a couple another question, but Bruce Moe again. And your points come up to the simple thing. Should a rich person pay more for sales tax for soda? That's what you're trying to tell us, that because you got something a little bit better, you have to pay a little bit more? No. I mean, then let's do it all right. And obviously, we have to get rid of lots of TIFs, all the TIFs and the pilots. Why is there's people down in Fargo that own millions upon hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars not paying their property taxes for us, and we have to make it up for them. So we got to do a hell of a lot if we're going to get this to work here, guys. And the simple thing is, you know, me and Kit's properties went up 300% in the last three years. Okay, basically because somebody down the road fixed up their house a little bit better too. I mean, so this is kind of being arbitrary, pulling up numbers that there shouldn't be done is not doing us any good. And I got to say one thing: how many of us feel safe after 2012 when the legislatures promised they were going to do something? Nothing happened. All right, I mean, very, very little. How the heck if they did such a good job, how did our properties go up 300% in 3 years? I don't have faith in our legislatures until they start showing something. All right, something's got to happen. Thank you.
You can answer. You go ahead.
Aaron's chomping at the bit here, so I'll keep mine short. I hear the concern about no faith in the legislature. I hear that frequently. And I think the simple question is, do you trust the legislature with your local budget more than you trust your city commission, more than you trust your county commission? Because
It's about even.
it's about even.
Yep, they're all.
So I generally hear more concerns about government waste at the state and at the federal level than I do at the county commission. Every legislative session I hear from my members, you know, we got to fix our damn roads out here. And we need some more support from the legislature to get that done. And what we're saying here is, no, we don't need to fix the roads. The roads are too good. All right, let's back off on funding. We talk about we're going to take Operation Prairie Dog and roll it into replacement payments for this. That is a direct reduction of infrastructure funding for this community if this measure were to pass.
Kit Brennan, and I'm married to Bruce. And I have a question, because here's some of the things that our state tax dollars are being used for. $45 million for the Mr. Wonderful program, which was given last time to the Shark Tank billionaire, who I'm sure was desperate for that amount. My all-time favorite, $1,600,000 for the All Kids Bike program to teach children how to ride bike at 300 schools. And of course, not to be left unknown, $21 million to the Historical Society. While I love history, that's a 78% increase in their budget. I haven't seen anything like that increase to my budget in years. Now, y'all keep asking us to budget. Every time you reassess our houses, every time somebody needs something, they add the mills and everything else. But I don't see anybody at the city, county, or state level that is really busting hump to budget. They keep telling me I have to. This at least is one answer to me being able to have a little bit more control and to look at my people in the face and go, how about you figure out how to not spend $1,600,000 to do something a parent or a big brother or somebody else should do, and teach a kid to ride a bike?
Yeah, I'll probably take that.
He'll do it for less.
Yeah.
He's already offered $300 to go to all the schools.
Yeah.
I was just impressed that you admitted in public he was your husband.
Yeah.
I'm the one that can't operate a phone.
So my response to that, and thank you again for your passion. I don't disagree that there are spending concerns. My pitch to all of you would be, if anything, there's a spending problem and not a structural problem. And I understand on the evaluation side, which has been brought up, that it might not be as transparent, and you have local government using the valuation increases to increase taxes without telling people. I understand that, but at the end of the day, it's still a spending problem. If you think your local government is spending too much money, that really is somebody you vote for. And if the members of the community say, you know what, I don't think counties are doing a bike program. I'm assuming that's some other program. I'm not aware of it. But
I'm just the messenger.
from the counties that I deal with, they are And every budget probably could be cut. I don't disagree with that. But I don't see counties, at least statewide, with a massive spending issue. Is there other subdivisions that are? I don't know. I can just tell you, when we think of this and when we think of changing the Constitution and statewide impacts, I can tell you not all communities are receiving the same thing. Castleton, I still put in the growing communities. So I agree it's not isolated, but Castleton, I put in the West Fargo category. I don't put in a Standing Rock. Standing Rock has got no growth. And you can go down there and nobody's complaining about the property taxes because there just is no growth and there is no services. So it's a fundamental balance that we can frame it any way we want, but a fundamental balance between tax paying and services. And do you want higher services or lower services? That's a legit question. Maybe we find efficiencies. But I still think at the end of the day, we got to decide what kind of services do we want. That's where I come back to. And at the end of the day, my property taxes are going to the sheriff and the teacher who are down the street from me. They're not going for Fargo diversion. And that's not picking on Fargo diversion. That's just a fact. My local dollars are going to people in my community. And I can live with that more so than spending, getting a sales tax that goes to Fargo when I come down to watch the Bison games, or when I get a higher income tax to make up for the difference. I have less control over that spending. It might not be ideal, but that's a fact. I will have less control over those dollars that are expended than when I spend my property tax. And I'm not trying to say just pay your taxes and enjoy it, because I understand there's got to be another way to reduce some of those burdens too.
Part of our problem that we hear a lot is the state blames the counties and the cities, and then the counties, local governments blame the state. And they're all pointing at each other, and we're caught in the middle. And there's been no solution for us. All right? Now, we hear an awful lot about, well, the legislature's going to fix it. There's already been alluded to, there have been 20 bills, over 20 bills in the last 12 years to address property tax reform, 20 of them. Now, I happened to look up the record of your legislators. Senator Lem did vote yes on a study to look at how property tax affects senior citizens. But Representative Beltz and Haggart and Lem have voted no on every single bill that proposed a cap on the increases, not freezing them, just capping them at, like, say, 3%, 5%. Oh, and by the way, if the voters wanted to, they could override that cap, so it was not a hard cap. And yet your legislators voted no on all of those. But now we're supposed to say, well, what you're proposing is so terrible, we just don't know what's going to happen. Maybe, but I'll tell you what will happen if this is defeated. Your property taxes will go up. You will still have cities, counties fighting with state, and both of them back and forth and saying it's your fault, it's your fault. That will not stop if this measure doesn't pass.
I'm sorry. Again, going back to my initial comments, and I don't disagree with you, but if you think we're going to walk out of this anytime today or in the next 50 years, and everybody says taxes are perfect, we're all happy, that's just not going to happen. Everybody is always complaining about taxes, whether it's property tax, income tax, sales tax. It's just one of those things that's part of society. If you want to go to the Red Book, North Dakota is the 25th in property tax. The great conservative state of Texas is higher than us. So to say we're some sort of out of whack tax and spend, I just fundamentally disagree with that. I respect it. Can we do better? Yes, but we're not going to just solve this by passing a constitutional measure, which cannot be changed by anybody, by the way.
But we've already proven we're doing nothing, which also isn't solving anything.
Again, totally respect you.
Are we just supposed to sit here and suck it up?
No.
I mean, because that's kind of, I'm sorry, that's what I heard, was there's nothing, nobody likes taxes, there's nothing we can do about it, so suck it up.
20,
Tired, I'm dry.
I get you, 20 mills were taken off, so that wasn't nothing. What I would say is the only reason we're here is because oil industry has given us tons of money, and now we're trying to figure out where to park it. Should we park it more on primary residence? Should we park it more on economic development? I think those are totally legit questions to have. And you're gonna get $500 off. Again, is that big enough? Probably not.
Everybody I've talked to hasn't seen the $500 because the valuations went up. And I got a little note in my thing. They'll let me know if I get my $500 in December, conveniently after the election.
May I add just one point?
Okay.
All this money from the sales.
We're gonna move on, guys, okay? We've got other people that want questions. If we have time, we'll come back to it, okay? But I want to make sure everybody that has a question has the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Levis. I'm a resident here of Hillsborough. My question, comment, I am currently opposed to Measure 4. And my primary reason for that comes back to local control. And I know at the beginning of this conversation, the proponents of this mentioned that with Measure 4, we would remain having the control local. And I know Shar, with respect, gave her definition of local control. My definition of local control is when we have the power at the local level to levy our taxes and also elect the officials locally who will decide how those monies get used for the local services. So our city and our county commissioners, I think it's really great that they're the ones that have the opportunity to really think about how we're going to be managing those monies for our roads and our bridges. And quite frankly, and we have some county commissioners in this room, and I know that some of those have an awful lot of time and effort and energy put into knowing what our roads, our county roads and bridges are like, and have a lot of time and effort into that. And quite frankly, that's just not going to happen if this gets moved up to the state level. The state is not going to have that kind of time to come out to Trail County and care about Trail County 3. That's gravel going out into the middle of nowhere. That's just how that works. Furthermore, whoever holds the purse strings holds the power. That's just how that works. So if the local government doesn't have the property tax authority, and it's only the state, it is the state that will make these decisions. It is the state that will make those decisions. It is a lot of work having decisions close to the people. Local control is a lot of work. Anybody who holds an elected office knows that at any level. But it's really important that we keep those decisions close to the people as possible, and part of that is having the property tax here. Otherwise, the state gets to come in and tell us how our roads get to be. The state gets to come in and tell us how our school will be operated. That's how that works.
If I could just make one point, I hear we sort of sometimes talk about this government entity and this government entity as sort of like this behemoth that lives behind some curtain somewhere. And when you get your proposed property tax statement, which we all should have just gotten, every political subdivision is required to have a budget hearing. And we, the people, have the opportunity to attend that budget hearing and say, this is out of line. This service is something we shouldn't be paying for. They have that obligation to do that. And I think my observation, frankly, talking to my members about how we address this problem, one of the things is we got to show up to those meetings. I live in Jamestown. I know we talk about, property taxes are higher everywhere. My property tax bill is lower this year, despite a valuation increase on my home. And so local communities are using property taxes differently. When I go out to western communities in the western part of the state, some of the lowest property taxes in the state. Every community, every political subdivision has a different fiscal philosophy. Every community, every different political subdivision has different expectations and uses property taxes differently. If you're upset with how your local community is using property taxes, show up to the meeting. And if you find that you're in the minority in that conversation, have conversations like this with your neighbors and see if you can build broader support for whatever cuts you are trying to propose. I guarantee you your chances will be better doing that than trying to get your local community activated to go influence the state legislature, sheerly by the geography and the scale of the state and its population.
I respect the question, and I hear it a lot. What I think it's a little bit of misinformation that's been perpetuated by those who want to scare people into losing local control. The point being is that at no point, given what Measure 4 does and does not do, will you ever have to ask the legislature for a dime. There's no reason for it, because they're replacing the amount of property taxes you're currently paying right now. If you need more money in the future, you do not ask the state for more money. The political subs, whether it's excuse me, the Fargo schools, they need $1 million more for teachers' pay or whatever else. They can do a bus tax, or every home pays $10 for a bus tax or whatever, based on if you own a property or not. There's no strings attached to the money that's coming from the state for the replacement of property taxes. So if the city of Fargo levied $25 million this year in property taxes, they'll get $25 million a year forever. If your community has $43,000 that they levied in property taxes, Hillsborough will get $43,000 a year forever from the state, and they cannot tell you how to spend that money. If you need more money than that, for any reason in your community, you can raise taxes in a myriad of ways. Once again, a road tax for $10. The state can't stop you from doing that. You'll never have to ask the state for money again. And one thing I want you to consider is local control. We all want it. But if you're charging me $5,000 so that I feel like I have more control, I'd rather have the state give me $25 million and then I'll figure out how to pay for it later. I don't want to pay $5,000 a year so I can say I have local control. It's the same amount of control. If you need more money for your local subs will have to raise it. The state will not give you more. You're going to get what you're going to get from this year forever. So this idea that the state is the one that's pulling the strings or telling you how to spend your money or telling you how much money you're going to get for your schools or your streets or your county or whatever else, that's not real. That's not true. That is not what this measure does.
Sorry, I just have to jump on that. I agree with what the measure does. 2024 levies will be set in stone that the legislature will have to do it. But I absolutely would like where you get your statutory authority that a county, a city, a school can put on other taxes. There is no statutory authority to put on a bus tax. And I can tell you, I will litigate that because somebody is going to say, where did you get the ability to tax? Which is by default. Now, again, could the legislature give us that authority? Yeah, but it does not currently exist. Wait, where? Tell me the statute number. No, tell me the statute number where we can put a bus tax on.
The city of Fargo, other subs can put a road tax on whenever they want.
Okay, let me just ask a really quick question, because if that's true, that the state is going to be, okay, if this measure goes through, the state is going to be liable for digging up $3.2 billion to make up for the property tax. Okay, if that's the case, the state will forever and ever more be burdened with that. Okay, and that tax, they're going to have to make up for that funding someplace. So call it cut funding. I don't know where you do that, but let's just say we get taxed $3.2 billion in some way, shape, or form from the state. We're not getting what we need for our roads in Trail County, North Dakota, because let's face it, we're rural. We're just not going to have the representation out there like they would in Fargo or some of the other urban areas. So now we're going to be paying more in taxes here beyond that $3.2 billion that we're going to be paying to the state. Doesn't that increase the overall tax burden for everybody then? If that's the case and we have to make that up going forward? Because
I will have gone from paying $5,000 a year in property taxes to zero. That's where you're making it up. So now there's more taxing authority because I'm paying zero now. So if I'm now paying, it sure does.
So we're gonna get taxed somehow.
So I told you about $2.5 billion in my quick speech, where that money comes from. The other thing I want to say is the Operation Prairie Dog is about $1.5 billion every 2 years. And no one ever blinked an eye about that. That's half what we're talking about right here. So we did the Prairie Dog Fund. Everyone clapped and said what a great idea it is. City of Fargo takes in $25 million every 2 years for that. That's $12 million per year. That's half of what our property tax bill is every year. So everyone said what a good job it was. This legislator has never said boo about how that's hurting their ability to govern. But now we're talking about this tax in particular, and everyone tends to freak out. It's because the government uses tax incentives to give them to the friends that they have, so that some people are paying taxes, some people aren't. Fargo is excellent at this. If you're rich and you want to build something, we'll give you a tax incentive. If you want to build a new house in this new area, we'll give you a tax incentive. But if you're a regular guy or girl or family that lives in North Fargo and you've been there for 8 years, you're going to pay 30, 40, 50% more in taxes over the next coming years because you're not doing anything special for me. So we have the money. We've proven it with the Operation Prairie Dog Fund.
Is anybody else? Oh, Bruce, hold on, please.
I don't think I need a mic. My name is Bruce Bowersox. My name is Bruce Bowersox. The concern that I have is this is a constitutional amendment. There have been a lot of ideas proposed about how we're going to replace the funding and how we're going to acquire additional funding in subsequent years. That's great. Those are all great ideas. But we're just changing the constitution of the state. And then we're just throwing it up in the air for somebody else to figure it out. And at the present time, I haven't seen anybody come here. None of the four of you have given us a solid plan or proposal that would use those various sources that you've talked about. So it seems to me, I agree with everybody's arguments for and con, but to just change the constitution of the state and then tell the legislature, well, you figure it out, I think that's irresponsible.
Any comments?
Oops. In the first place, it does need to be a constitutional measure because it's in the Constitution that property tax is set out. And so, in other words, in order to change property tax, you have to amend the Constitution. Now, we have lots of ideas on how this should look, but you can't put that into a measure. A measure can only cover one topic. Okay? And we certainly don't want to put it into the Constitution. We don't want to lock the Constitution into saying you shall govern or fund government with such and such a mechanism. Okay? Now, we do have several, I think it's like 23 legislators who want to see property tax ended and have already drafted legislation to address the very things that you're talking about, to authorize schools and these other political sub-townships and so forth that currently don't have revenue-raising capabilities. They are already poised with the legislation to allow other political subdivisions to generate the additional revenues that they may need going on down the road. Now, we always like to jump to, well, prices are going to go up. We have to, have all this extra money, like right now. The fact of the matter is, the first year that this goes into effect, you're going to see a huge savings in just the property tax assessment itself. Between Fargo, West Fargo, and Cass County, they spend $4.2 million just to assess and collect the property tax. I believe here in Hillsborough, it's $15,000, which is a better deal than what Cass County is doing. But still, there's a $15,000 savings right there that you don't have to assess property tax. You also get a boom, like Tony has talked about, this economic boom that occurs when people have more money to spend. One of the reasons we give all these property tax favors and goodies to these businesses is because we say, well, that'll increase spending and that increases sales tax and it pays for itself. Well, just imagine if the whole entire state were a Renaissance zone, the whole entire state were an economic development zone, and those tax dollars that you're not now paying to the state, that $5,000 in property tax, you're spending it on improving your house, buying a better car, putting braces on your kids, and so forth. That generates more revenues all across the all across the spectrum. And then finally, we talk about so much of our state revenues come from oil, coal, gas. True. Unfortunately, North Dakota has two prongs to its economic foundation: agricultural and energy, and those are the two most volatile industries there are. And we are subject to these ups and downs in the market, and we cannot base a state budget on such a volatile industries. And so once we make the whole entire state an economic development zone, we're going to diversify the types of industries and the types of businesses that move into this state. And that will be a much better, firmer foundation for what this state looks like going forward.
So, I want to just walk a little bit with this premise that, our state is beholden to crony capitalism, right? And look, I'll be honest. I hear from my members concerns about, some of the economic development tax incentives that we've talked about, right? And now we're saying, let's just give that to everybody. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we have companies in this state who are paying millions, over $10 million in property tax. That will be wiped off the map. Those folks will not be paying property tax. And the revenue will be replaced by North Dakota citizens, people who live here, who generate income here, and who buy things here, not necessarily those companies. And now we say, well, in that case, we can assess a new property tax on that company and recoup those funds. But that's where the argument gets really confusing for me, because we're beholden to this crony capitalist system. We're going to give many large out-of-state corporations significant tax breaks that they're not asking for. And then the crony capitalists in the state legislature are going to go back and say, hey, I'm not your friend anymore, I want your money. I don't think that that's a realistic expectation if that is your premise. And so, look, these these inequities, they exist. And I don't think there's any perfect way to solve that system. I think we have to do a better job of having conversations about it. But that same thing, that same economic development incentive that you're talking about at a local level, that's going to happen at a state level, because you are giving large out-of-state corporations a major tax break. It is the citizens of North Dakota who will have to pay for it. That's a fact.
Okay, questions, Tom? If we have time, Sarah, we'll get back to you, but I want to give everybody an opportunity.
Yeah, I'm not here to ask either side a question. I just want to make a statement I sit on the Board of County Commissioners here, and a couple of meetings ago, whatever it was, our last meeting, our legislators were in, and they were talking to us about their views on this matter. And it was helpful because they gave us some information I wasn't aware of. They also know I like to push the buttons a little bit. In this situation, they told us at that meeting that, they'd had conversations about this. My thing with the legislature, not these three guys, but in general, it would have been nice that this time in the voting process, if they would have had, their plan for dealing with this measure if it passed, and if it didn't pass, their plan for what they're going to do to give some tax relief out there. That's what I would like to have seen. The other side of it is, for your group coming in, I have a problem with the way that you did this, in that it's kind of a bait and switch. We've heard measure number 4 since the beginning of this, that you'll eliminate property taxes. We don't have to pay nothing. Okay, that's what you came up with. Now today, when we get down to the 11th hour, you're coming in and saying, you can go tax a bus. Well, come on. And you're saying we can go tax a special assessment on homes, because nobody likes special assessments. I'm sure you don't like them on your home. You never told us how much the special assessments were of that bill you have there, but nobody likes it. There's been articles in the past with Fargo-Moorhead that there are people that have to move or something because of all the properties they put in, the special assessments are killing them. The plan of, Ken here sits on the board with me, that we can just go out and tax this or do that to raise the revenue. We don't have any kind of taxing authority. So we can't do that. The city, I think you can still do special assessments, but you're taxing a property with a special assessment. So you're not getting away with any of that stuff. the comment over there about the out-of-state interest, the millions of dollars that these people are coming away scot-free, is crazy. A gentleman made a comment at our meeting that he has land, he rents, and he farms, he has out-of-state people that he rents from. You think they're gonna give him a break on his land rent because you let him go out, get off the hook? That's not gonna happen. The other thing is, if you want to just go in a small community, we're not home rule here. We don't have taxing authority like Fargo-Moorhead does. But if you look across the state, go back just recently in Castleton, you know, they couldn't get a bond issue passed for their school. The voters wouldn't do it. We had one here 2 or 3 years, whenever it was, 2 or 3 years ago for our school, simply to do the repairs. Not to build a new school, there was talk of that, but just to get the repairs done, and it couldn't get passed. So this idea of, well, you just go out and tax this, this, and that, and get the money you need, that's not gonna happen. So generally speaking, the way you did this, you know, you put it out there, you know, eliminate your taxes, and you come in here and say, well, these are the different ways you can get the money. Don't agree with that at all. And I don't want a response, I'm just making a statement, okay? Thank you.
It's a legitimate point, so I'll just speak.
Okay.
I would like to respond. Again, because some people are getting a better deal than me, maybe, you know, Bill Gates comes and buys some land. Well, I don't like that he's getting a tax break, so I'll just pay $5,000 a year in property taxes. I don't think that argument holds water. Because someone's getting a better deal than me, I don't want to pay $5,000 to spite them. You know what I mean? I don't like that. Specials is obviously not a part of this. And again, you're saying, well, you're going to replace it and you're just going to raise the taxes so there's no benefit to anybody. I'm going to zero on my property taxes. So if some other tax goes up by $5, $10, $50 a month, I'm still thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars ahead every single year. So it's not just you're raising taxes on top of your property taxes. And by the way, my property taxes next year will go up. They went up by $500 this year. They're going to go up $500 next year, maybe even $1,000. So to say that there's no benefit of getting rid of this particular tax, you could still tax property. That this measure does not preempt you from doing that. Still tax property, just not based on the value. I think we've lost a lot of that in this conversation.
Just give her a chance to do her fact check here.
It was mentioned earlier that ballot measures have to be limited to one subject item, and the truth of the matter is that is not true. As a matter of fact, the Constitution, or the ballot measure number 2 on the ballot is a ballot measure to do just that, to limit it. So right now you can have measures with more than one subject in them. So that's just a fact check.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more here. We got another question?
Mine's more of a comment.
A comment, okay.
I just have a comment. You guys talk about putting a $50 tax on every bus or every house or whatever. Do you guys realize by doing that, you are making the gap even larger between those that are rich and those that have very little? You are making it even further of a gap by doing so. You can probably afford a $500,000 home where I can only do $100,000. And then you want me to pay the same as you do. How do you expect me to do that and still survive day to day?
For your $100,000 home, you went from paying $2,000 a month or a year to paying $0. Whereas I went from paying $5,000 a year to $0. And then your garbage bill comes in $50, and so is mine. And your sewer bill is $50, and so is mine. Because where I live, it's the same price. Lights, we have street lights. You pay $6 a month for that where I come from. So if you don't like the inequality of that, I guess, there are more taxes than you realize that do exactly that. And again, you're already ahead. So for those who have less funds, we're taking away maybe one of your biggest tax burdens that you have, putting it to $0, and replacing it with a $6 light fee. You're still coming out far, far ahead. So we're not burdening you more, we're relieving a burden and adding more transparency into how we tax people.
Good evening. My name's Representative Jared Haggard. I represent District 20 in the House of Representatives. Want to say thank you both sides for coming out tonight. Also want to thank Char for her research into the voting records. That's been a problem. I mean, you're 100% correct. I have voted against caps in the past. And I appreciate you being truthful about it, because honestly, in the past, my voting record has been confused with Lori Beth Hager, and slight difference. But that aside, the reason why I voted against caps is because I do believe in local control. These gentlemen back here in the county commission, they represent us. The city commissioners, you know who to go to. Not that you don't know that I represent District 20. I mean, all my contact information's on the state website. Just a couple of things. So, Mr. Gehrig, you talked earlier about the wasteful spending, and I'm guessing part of that would be $125 million to a fertilizer facility. Would that be part of what you would call government waste? Do you have I've seen a list circulated around, but do you have an idea?
List? Let me help you with that.
Do you have any idea on the legislation or how that grant came to be? Okay. Let me just shed some light on this $125 million grant that's pork. The $125 million is a forgivable loan to NextEra to construct a fertilizer plant in North Dakota. Now, this loan is not forgivable if there is no fertilizer produced. So I think that is a responsible way to pursue economic development in an egg producing state. I mean, we do have two wildly sporadic commodity markets that drive our economy. Fertilizer is the #1 expense in an egg producer's budget. And currently, North Dakota is at the end of the line when it comes to receiving fertilizer. We get it from the Gulf. If we can invest in a company through a process of having a $125 million forgivable loan to incentivize them to produce a product that is used by every North Dakota producer, I think that's a win. And if they don't build it, they don't get the $125 million. So, that in and of itself, the $700 million in pork or whatever number was stated, I mean, that's quite a chunk out of that. The essence of the measure, in my estimation, and from looking at it and reading it and researching it, we are taking away taxing authority. That's what the vote is about. Taking away taxing authority for political subdivisions. The state of North Dakota does not have the ability to levy property taxes. That's been gone for a while. We wanted it done at a local level. As Measure 4 states, you remove that authority and the state replaces it. The state's portion in the property tax world, Char, you mentioned it earlier, counties point at us, we point at them, homeowners, like all of us in here, property taxpayers, are caught in the middle. The state's role in this is to set the formulas by which they can assess. So there are different assessment rates for centrally assessed, for ag property, and for residential property. So that's the state's role. Now, by eliminating the ability for political subs to levy taxes based on valuation, if this does pass, everything goes to zero. It shifts from your right hip pocket to your left. We're all residents of the state. So it's hard for me as a legislator, and I told the county commission this the last time, you know, this measure is about whether or not we want to allow local political subs to take a vote or take and levy based on valuation. That's what it is at its essence. Would you agree? Okay. So you remove that, you know, that is really tying the hands of county commission, of city council to take and figure out where their funding's at. It limits the ability for that. But it also, I'm sorry, I'm a Norwegian, lost my train of thought, but, and a legislator to boot, so, I mean, but when we go back into session, you know, how do we approach Measure 4 as a legislature? If Measure 4 passes, citizens are not asking us to allow for extra taxes. I don't think that's what you're proposing. So, I mean, I do find it a bit disingenuous, as was previously stated. You know, you are not proposing new taxes, but you're okay with new taxes. So I just can't really square that.
Well, like we said earlier, some taxes are more fair. Some taxes are just good taxes to begin with. A tax that makes you lose your home is not a good tax. A tax that you have no control over is not a good tax. A tax that taxes some people at one rate and other people at another rate and goes up and down and you can't budget for it because you don't know what it's going to be from year to year, that's not a good tax. Okay? Yes, we have to pay taxes, but and you say now you're going to hamper the political subs, the counties and cities from generating revenues. Are you telling me then that if Measure 4 passes, you will not authorize any other taxing mechanism to political subs?
I believe what I said was I don't think the measure asks us to take and tax or allow new taxing mechanisms, does it?
No, the measure doesn't, but good common sense does, doesn't it?
That between common sense and the measure, I mean, I think we could have we'd probably disagree on what the common sense of the measure is. You know, I think this is having your cake and eating it too. It's not that the legislature would look to punish political subs, no. But at the same time, if you have a vote on a constitutional amendment that restricts taxing authority at a local political sub level, you are in effect telling the legislature, do not create more taxing authority.
No, we're saying this one particular tax is abusive, oppressive, and punitive and capricious, and you need to find a better way to fund government. That's all we're saying. Property tax is the worst way to fund government. We can figure out all sorts of other ways. God himself is not as creative as government when it comes to creating new taxes.
I have a question though. What is the most fair way? Is it a sales tax?
I would, for me personally, I would say I would prefer a sales tax, but that's me, and I know that there are good arguments against sales tax. I'm not saying sales tax is the answer. I'm not saying that an income tax is the answer, or now, you know, Tony has talked about the bus tax, or the road tax, or the bathroom tax, or whatever, banana tax. I mean, there's a zillion different ways we can go about this. Every tax has its pros and cons, but property tax has the most oppressive and repressive consequences to it of all the taxes.
And the
I would-
local subs will tell you what the most fair thing is. That's the point.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The local subs will decide what's most fair for their people, right? So we talk about one size fits all from the other side here. Well, property tax really is one size fits all because it's statutory. It's in the Constitution. It tells you what you can or can't do with property taxes. It tells you specifically what you can or can't do. It tells you the maximum amount of mills you can have. It tells you how you evaluate homes, how close to that value you have to be. It is one size fits all. So it does limit the local subs and how they tax. If the legislature gives those local subs the authority, they can be more creative and they can do what's best for their communities. It's not up to the state or me or Charlene to tell Hillsborough what's best for their taxing entity, or Fargo schools or Castleton schools or whatever else. It's up to those local subs to explain to the people who they serve why they're taxing them in this certain way versus this certain way, and this bill makes that happen. This measure makes that happen.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that.
But Tony, to your point respectfully, you are saying that. You're saying that I'm deciding for your community, I'm deciding for Hillsborough, that property taxes based on valuation are not the fairest thing for you. And I think one of the things that I've thought about a lot with this measure, because we've talked about user fees, right? We've talked about whether those are fair. We've talked about property taxes based on square foot, on all of this. Why didn't we have an initiated measure to give counties, cities, townships, rural fire departments, rural ambulance districts, et cetera, different authorities? Why not say, hey, you're not obligated to assess property tax. You have the authority now to assess fees. You have the authority now to assess property taxes based on something other than the value of the home. I think if we truly wanted to empower local government to make the best decisions, that is what the measure would be. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think my members would be all in. Let's give them different options. Let's let local communities have those conversations about what they think is best. But this does prohibit that political subdivision from using property taxes based on valuation, whether members of that community think it is fair or not.
The legislature could have done that over the last 30 years, and they haven't. We've been asking for different ways to do property tax and collect tax revenue in a more fair way. We've been begging for them for answers. That would have been great. I would have been all for that. But they haven't done it. So now we put a proposal forward that does something real. It makes it force the legislature to do those things we want them to do. That's the point of this measure. Is it all knowing, all perfect? No. But it's forcing the legislature to do exactly what you're saying and allow us locals to be more creative and tax in the most fair way that we believe. I was a city commissioner for 7 years. I would have loved a different way to tax people other than property taxes that would be more transparent and better for people of Fargo, but they haven't done it. So I wouldn't ask us why we didn't do that. I would ask them why they didn't, and all we're doing is reacting to that disservice that we were having for the last 20, 30 years.
Okay, we got one more question here. We're at the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to have just gentlemen ask the last question. I'm sure that everybody, I'm assuming they won't just run out the door when we're done. So if you do have a question for them, but we want to be respectful to people's time, and if you want to hang around and visit and talk about it, great. But this gentleman will give an opportunity to get the last question in for the night.
Thank you. My name is Darrell Osborne. I've been a resident here in Hillsborough for 22 years. I've heard both sides. I was undecided on which way I was going to vote because I read through all of it. Some of it looks good, some of it don't. Somebody said, where do you do your shopping here in Hillsborough? A lot of us don't do very much shopping in Hillsborough here because the prices are out of sight. So we go to Fargo or Grand Forks. Grand Forks County gets our tax dollars. Hillsborough don't. Fargo gets our tax dollars. Hillsborough don't. So, that's a moot point, as far as taxes. If that's, what does this do for our growth of our community? I hear all the time that we want to expand, EDC, all this other stuff. Wouldn't that prevent us from growing? Which measure yes or no, would prevent the town from growing, the counties, the citizenship. Hillsborough is a farming community. Hillsborough is a retirement community. We got a lot of seniors that own homes in the city of Hillsborough, and their taxes are going up and up, but their Social Security is not going up. This year, there's going to be a COLA from the government. It will raise the Social Security $56, and that does not take and do with the living of our senior citizens. We got to start taking care of our senior citizens. You know, I've heard a lot of different, yays and nays about different people, on different programs. I agree that sometimes we are overspending. We are living beyond our means. I would propose no new taxes at all. Leave everything the way they are. I would propose no new taxes, no levies, nothing, until we get caught up and get a handle on our spending. And not, spend unwisely. We need to be living in our means, within our means. There's a lot of companies up here that are out-of-state companies that is part of our town. Casey's, all that money and everything that goes to Casey's in Iowa. So now another state gets our money. Any business, Burger King, those were going out of Utah, So now the money's going to Utah, whenever we do our businesses. A lot of our businesses can't find help because nobody wants to work. But our economy is not geared to raise our taxes, cut our taxes. We need to start to live within our means and not keep up with the Joneses.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I really do appreciate it. I think it was good conversation. I hope it was. I want to thank all of our people up front here, Matt and everybody, for coming all the way from Jamestown and Bismarck and where are you from, Castleton or in Fargo. So I appreciate these people coming and taking the time. I hope most everybody learned something from this. If you were undecided, maybe you're still undecided, I don't know, but hopefully, and now you at least have a contact of people to where you could maybe get your questions answered if you need to. And I can't thank enough everybody being respectful of everybody's time and in the questions, and the talk back and forth was very respectful, I felt. So unless you have some closing thoughts, we'll just wrap it up. And once again, I thank you. And contrary to, I did not sponsor this. I know it was put on my, Paul Gary did not pay for the cow water. It was Grow Hillsborough. It's an organization we have in Hillsborough that has a small amount of money given to them by economic development to help things in Hillsborough, whether it be different education purposes, meetings to get development going, whether it be like our pool. They sponsored a meeting on our swimming pool that we could maybe have in the future. So that's what's sponsored by Grow Hillsborough, which has a small amount of money that they can buy these things and coordinate these things. So once again, thanks to everybody for coming out, and I can't thank you all enough for your time.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, get Fargo back on track. Thanks, guys. Yep, no, thank you.